All right, guys, it's time to talk about Resident Evil Requiem, man. I gotta say, I'm thinking we're back. This game is awesome. It has everything you want in a Resident Evil game. It's got great horror elements, it's got great level design, great gunplay and mechanics, classic action set pieces, and a lot more. And of course, it brought the GOAT back, Leon Kennedy. And I don't know if he's the only GOAT because, Chris Redfield is also my boy. He might be top. I don't know. But either way, Resident Evil Requiem is just incredible, and I want to talk about it right now. Now, at this moment, I've done two full playthroughs of Requiem. I did a regular, standard, classic difficulty, and then another casual playthrough just so I could get some of the challenges to get infinite ammo. And I'm currently on my insanity mode run. I'm about maybe three quarters into the game. So I think it's a perfect time to dive into just why this game is so awesome. And before I really get into, the nooks and crannies of RE9, I really just want to highlight how absolutely goated Capcom is because their level of consistency is something you don't see often in games. I could only really liken it to one other company, and that's Rockstar, in terms of just consistent banger after banger after banger. Like with Capcom and Resident Evil, we got RE4 remake just recently. We got RE Village, RE Biohazard, and now RE Requiem, and that's not even considering the older games that are also amazing, like Resident Evil 5, the OG Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake. Like, dude, the list just goes on, and this company, I can't tip my hat off enough to them. They are single-handedly saving gaming. Now, if you've seen anything from Resident Evil Requiem or you've played the game, you'd know you're playing as two separate characters, Grace Ashcroft and Leon Kennedy. And dude, the gameplay sections could not be more different. It almost sometimes feels like you're playing two different games. And I think that was really important for Capcom, is trying to strike a balance between the horror and the thriller and the action sequences and just gunplay with Leon and stuff. And I think for the most part they did really, really well. The only complaint I have about this is kind of that at the beginning, the Leon sections are very sparse and you're mostly playing as Grace. And when you do get to Leon, it kind of feels a little bit like a mini game because everything feels so easy and you're just kind of flying through. Whereas with Grace, everything's just terrifying and you get one shot at a lot. And it's overall just a lot slower pace. You have to be a lot more methodical and thoughtful when taking action in your playthrough. Whereas, like I said before with Leon, it's kind of just balls to the wall. And the one thing I will say is it does feel like it flip flops a bit too fast in like the first half or so of the game. But nonetheless, I still think they balanced it pretty well, and it doesn't take away from how much I enjoyed the game. I still think all the sections of the game are fun and enjoyable. Now, I want to start off with talking about Grace and her sections and her character because I think her character and gameplay are both great. I think Capcom really hit the nail on the head when it comes to horror and just that feeling of desperation and helplessness, basically. Because when you're playing as Grace and you're falling on the floor running away from the girl, like you truly feel like you're about to die. And I can't even explain the feeling. It's something you don't really get in video games that often, and I think they just absolutely nailed it. You're a girl and you're not used to this type of stuff when you're playing as her, so it makes complete sense that she wouldn't be as confident and as easy to play with as Leon, and that's made very well known as soon as you start playing with her in that intro section. And even after the intro section, you'll notice really fast that she just feels a little bit slower. She feels like she's less balanced. Her aiming isn't as accurate. She reloads her gun a little bit slower. These types of things just make it feel like you are at a disadvantage when compared to Leon. And I think that was an awesome design choice. And I think I wouldn't have it any other way. Now, for the bulk of your playthrough with Grace Ashcroft, you will be playing through the Rhodes Hill Care Center, and in my opinion, this is by far the best location in Resident Evil 9. And I would say, honestly, I'd put it up there with the best locations in Resident Evil in general. I'd have it up there with Romania from Resident Evil Village, or, Spain from Resident Evil 4. It's on that level. All of the puzzles are interesting and challenging in that classic Resident Evil style. You got terrifying mini bosses with the chef and the chunk. The visual design is incredible, the graphics are awesome, and overall, I've just been having a blast playing through it, man. Now, your overall objective as Grace is to escape the care center, and to do this, you'll have to explore the building, solve puzzles, gather materials, take out enemies, and in doing so, you'll find tons of Easter eggs and files that will help you uncover the truth about what's actually happening in the care center, and it all just feels like classic Resident Evil. The gameplay loop is great, and I have really no complaints, except maybe one thing, and I think that thing is how small Grace's inventory is. Now, I know they stress at the beginning of the game that inventory management was going to be key, But at times when I was playing, it felt like if you pick up two or three items, you were full, and then you had to go and put items in storage. There were a good amount of times in my playthroughs where I would uncover a quest item just to find out that I couldn't actually pick it up, and I had to go all the way back to the storage and then all the way back to the quest item. Now, this obviously isn't a major gripe, but it did get annoying at times. Now, like I said before, I think Capcom nailed the horror in this game, and I want to talk about that a little bit because it's tough to strike a balance between horror and action. You know, games like Resident Evil Village might have leaned a little bit too much into horror and not enough into action, whereas I feel like this game has a very, very good balance. The horror sections are absolutely terrifying, but you're also not completely defenseless, and especially when you're with Leon, they really tried to make it so that when you play as him, you're not really scared at all. But when you're playing as Grace, different story. Like that godforsaken basement section, dude. Peak horror. I was literally shitting my pants playing through this section on the first run. And the puzzles are great. Navigating your way through the whole area while knowing the girl is after you is genuinely mortifying, but fun at the same time. But I will say, doing that section on multiple playthroughs can get a bit tedious because I just don't want to do it. I did it once, I don't want to do it again. And obviously, when you want to complete these next runs, when you want to do an insanity run, you're going to have to do it again. And it sucks, but it's also great at the same time. So it's not really a complaint, but it kind of is, just a little bit. Now, before I talk about the GOAT Leon, I wanted to mention quickly just Grace's voice actors because it was one of the first things I noticed early on was that she was putting in a fucking performance, man. I cannot stress enough how good she was. She made every horror scene believable. You really felt like she was there in that moment, terrified for her life. And I just can't say enough good things. That really helped with the immersion and it really helped with the story, in my opinion. She just did a great job, and hats off to her. Now it's time to talk about Leon S. Kennedy and what really is there to say. We all know that it was going to be peak as soon as we start taking control of this man. He is filled with aura farming at every chance he gets. Corny ass dialogue, but it sounds amazing no matter what. Peak gameplay. You are mowing zombies down for the most part while you are playing as him. And it's just classic, dude. Like I said before, the beginning feels a bit flip-floppy and fast, almost like a minigame, but once you pass that basement section and you really take control of Leon for the rest of the majority of the game, it opens up awesomely, and it's just the fun begins, man. The fun begins. So the game becomes majority Leon about halfway through after you're done with the Grace basement section, and they do something really unique, which I don't really remember in any other Resident Evil games, and that is giving you a decently sized semi-open world in Raccoon City for you to explore and complete objectives. The gameplay loop is pretty much the same as all the other Resident Evil games. Explore this point of interest, find an item, complete a puzzle, get to the next area, and so on and so forth. And of course, it's filled with enemies for you to take out. But the great thing about this is that you still kind of feel like you're free in the semi open world. You have a crate where you get to upgrade all your weapons, buy new weapons, buy charms, do all sorts of things. And you really feel like you have this sandbox now to play with, and you don't feel weak anymore, which is why it's really interesting that contrast between playing as Grace and playing as Leon. They really tried to make it known that when you're playing as Leon, you are him, dude. No one could stand in your way, and you really feel that throughout the game. And it was awesome to play through, and it's probably my favorite part of the game after Rhodes Hill Care Center, not including the basement. Although I love the basement, like I said, playing through that multiple times is not for me personally. But I can play the Raccoon City section unlimited times. It's so fun, and you just have that power fantasy. You feel like a guy who's been doing this for years, like Leon has, and I just can't say enough good things. I have no complaints from this section of the game. You get to explore a bit of Raccoon City, you get to explore the police department, you get to find out some interesting lore about other characters like Albert Wesker and some other people, more Leon lore. There's a ton to love from these Leon sections of the game, and he also has a ton of great boss fights. The Spider boss fight, the Mr. X clone or Tyrant boss fight was fun as well. I just really, really enjoyed the sections with Leon, especially when you get to go full hands on and it's not just flippy floppy, like I said before. Now, the final level has you in the Arc facility, and you have sections playing as both Grace and sections playing as Leon. And I think, once again, just great level design. The visuals and the way it looks is awesome. You have multiple different enemy types with lickers, zombies, even humans. And, you have that hunk boss fight, which is also dope and something I didn't think we would get in this game. I just thought, in general, Resident Evil 9 did a really good job at pretty much everything it tried to do. It expanded the lore and the story pretty well. No, obviously the narrative isn't like exceptional or anything, but it is Resident Evil at the end of the day. I'm not looking at it for that. I thought the story served its purpose well, expanded the lore, like I said, had interesting characters. Zeno's interesting, Grace is interesting, even Victor's interesting to a degree. I don't think is as good as the others. And one thing I will say, spoiler alert, is I was pissed when Zeno just gets off like super easily at the end. I know he took Elpis and healed himself, but I just still was pissed because I thought he had a lot of potential as a character, and that may be a little minor complaint. But overall, man, this game has just been incredible. And I saw a lot of people saying that this game was too short. That was a major complaint I saw people complaining about. And it just made me kind of scratch my head because, like, if you've ever played a Resident Evil game, they aren't very long. And personally, while playing it, it did not feel short. I ended up completing my first playthrough in 12 hours, but it didn't feel like 12 hours. It honestly felt a lot longer. Like I felt like I could have been playing for 20 to 25 hours. And obviously, your first playthrough isn't your last time playing the game. Everyone knows you got to do multiple playthroughs, grind for infinite ammo, grind challenges, and do it all again. That's part of the beauty of Resident Evil. So yeah, anyone who didn't like this game, I seriously suspect you of being gay or stupid. I don't know, one or the other. Either way, game was amazing. Now, before I end this video, I want to start talking about some of the things I didn't like. I know I mentioned some in the video, but there's some more that I would like to talk about because the game isn't perfect. I've seen people say this is the best Resident Evil ever. I think it's really good, and it might be up there on that level. I don't know if I could say it's the best because there are a few things that I didn't love about the game, and it kind of just stops it from being like that 10 out of 10, and it's more like a 9 or a 9.5. Now, that's obviously not a huge gap. That goes to show how great this game was, but nonetheless, let's get on to the things I didn't love about Resident Evil 9. Now, I already mentioned before the issues I had with Grace's inventory and how much slots you have, so I'm not going to really go over that again, but I did want to mention how scarce, materials are when you're playing as Grace. I feel like it's just super rare to find stuff that you actually need. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I know it aids in the horror aspect and, the desperation aspect, but when you contrast it with Leon, ammo's just being like thrown at you the whole time you're playing as him. So it's just a weird contrast, in my opinion. One that was a little bit too unbalanced for me personally, but it's not a huge complaint. I still love the game and I still love the gameplay. That's not really huge, just a little bit of a nitpick. Another thing that I think they could have done better, and it's also not a huge thing, just more of a nitpick, was Leon's armory. I feel like there was not as many options as I would have liked. You got your shotgun, rifle, pistol, and submachine gun, and backup options for all of those. So 8 guns kind of in total in the main game for you to choose from. And then once you get your challenge points and you could unlock more weapons, there just didn't seem to be that crazy of a variety to choose from. And I just feel like it would have done better with, a wider range of items and weapons to choose from. I felt like that was slightly lacking, but once again, not a huge complaint. And probably my biggest complaint is the orphanage section. You know what I'm talking about if you play the game, where you play as a little orphan, Chloe, who's, I guess, a clone, and you have to escape the orphanage. This section was painful, man. This section alone might have brought this game down zero point 0.5 points because it's just so tedious. Doing it on another playthrough and your third playthrough just so boring and you just want to skip it. I wish there was an option just to skip that section because there's no combat. It's only like 15 minutes long and it just seems kind of pointless. It doesn't really tell you much about anything that's going on. It's just a little bit of lore, and I just feel like it was unneeded, and a lot of people agree with me as well. If you look online, it's probably the most hated section of the game, and I think it's for good reason personally. But overall, Resident Evil Requiem is an incredible game and an incredible experience, and there is really not much I would change. I think it's very close to the perfect Resident Evil game. Is it the best Resident Evil game ever? I don't know about that. It's possible. Maybe in time with more playthroughs, it'll, clearly take that number one spot. But right now, I think it's between Resident Evil 9, Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil 5, and Resident Evil 4. Those are probably my top four. They're kind of interchangeable, to be honest. And don't come into my comment section talking about Resident Evil 5 as if it's not one of the GOATs. I don't care what you say. If you don't like Res 5, you had no friends. That's all I'm going to say on that topic. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe. Peace.